self-portrait as means is that we're going to be looking at who we are, our identity, right? And we're going to be creating a symbolic self-portrait. So this doesn't mean a photo of ourselves or a drawing of ourselves, but it's other images and symbolism to show our viewer who we are as a person. So, does anybody want to tell me what they believe symbolism to mean or be? What about you, Chloe? What is symbolism?
It's like expressing something.
Yeah.
Like through, like picture.
Yeah, through an image, right? So these are all symbols. But symbolism goes a little further. It's one of the most important elements in giving your artwork depth. It can also be used as like metaphors in a poem, or the setting or scene in a movie or a book. It can also just be something as simple as the colors that you use in the artwork you're making, right? Colors have the ability to communicate with us. So symbols can be broad, like a storm symbolizing danger, or more specific, like a crow symbolizing death. You can also create very specific or personal symbols, right? So like if I use broken glass in my piece, it may not mean the same thing to me that it does to you, and that's okay, because you're still evoking an emotion from your viewer. So first up, we're going to look at Peter Clay's Vanitas. This is from 1625, and he was a Dutch painter. I want you guys to really look at this piece, deconstruct it, and try to decipher kind of what the artist is saying with the symbols he's using. So let's start from the left. What do we see? Speak up.
A candle.
A candle, right? What about the candle?
It's like almost out.
Yeah, it's almost out. It's at like the very end of its time, right? What else do we see? Yeah, so there's still a little bit left, but we can tell it's going to go out soon, right? It's fleeting. What else do we see?
A skull.
A skull, right? What does this stand for?
Death.
Death, right? And just like the candle is about to burn out, like it's at the end of its life, he's telling you straight up with this symbol that I think all of us really recognize, bringing up the topic of death. What else do we see? Actually, stopwatch, but yes, it does look like a compass. Right, so again, the clock is ticking. What else? What about the flower?
It's dying.
Oh, why is it dying? It's been cut off the plant, right? It's no longer growing. It's at the end of its life. Yes, yes. And then this one, does anybody know what this is? Yeah, it's a cracked walnut. So walnuts will have a really long shelf life before they're cracked, but after they're cracked, they go bad pretty quickly. Okay, so what do you think he's talking about? What do you think this artist is trying to communicate with you? Death, right? So Vanitas is actually a genre of Dutch painting in the 17th century. And this whole genre of painting uses symbols of death to remind you how fleeting your life is. Right? It's not supposed to be morbid. It's simply here to remind you that the time you spend here is important, and to live in the now, live in the moment. Okay? Next up, we have who? Frida Kahlo, that's right. So this is a piece titled The Two Fridas. And does anybody remember the story behind this one? No? Speak up? Yes, yes, I love it too. It's beautiful. So, to give you a little context, because sometimes to understand symbolism, we need contextual knowledge first. We have to kind of understand where the artist is coming from, their lens that they're looking at the world through, right? So, Kahlo is half German, Hungarian, and half Mexican, indigenous. And she often felt really conflicted about this side of her. Her husband, Diego Rivera, was actually a Mexican muralist. And he was a huge Mexican nationalist, and he kind of shunned this side of her, right? Made her kind of feel like she was a colonizer in his homeland. And so she often wanted to cut this side off of herself. She kind of rejected that side of herself. So what do we see here that symbolizes that?
Like the left, her clothes are more kind of like covering her up, but then on the right, like she's wearing more revealing clothes.
Yeah, so the dress on the left, this is traditional Hungarian garb, and the dress on the right is a traditional indigenous Mexican outfit. Okay, what else do we see? Yeah, so this side is literally cutting herself off from this whole other side of herself. Oh, I like noticing that detail. Yeah, so it's more closed on this side, open on this side.
Not just open and bend, so I can still part of her, but she's still like her.
Yeah, so they're touching, but she's still cutting that part of herself off. She's also, this is really hard to see obviously, because the screen's just not big enough, but she's holding a portrait of her husband, Diego Rivera, in this hand, on the Mexican indigenous side. Right, again, making that connection between what her husband thinks of her and her identity, and what she feels about herself. Almost there. So next up is Mary Sabinde. Does anybody know what apartheid was? Without peeking? No, nobody's familiar with the term apartheid? I can't believe you guys don't like that. So, apartheid was a political and social system in South Africa, and it lasted from the late 40s up until the 90s. And basically what apartheid did was, in Afrikaans it means separateness. But what it did is it let the white Dutch minority take over a lot of the land and pushed most of the indigenous people into these small little villages and made it so that the only work they could really get was under the white minority rule. So, Mary Sabinde lived through apartheid and saw the fall of it. Her mother and her grandmother worked as maids because it was the only job that they could get or were allowed to have, essentially. And most of her work is about this. So this is a piece called Her Majesty Queen Sophie. And Sophie's a recurring character that she likes to use in her work. What do we see here that could show that oppression that she's feeling? Yeah, so she's wearing this really royal looking blue dress, but she's wearing an apron over it. What else do we see? What about the collar that's around her neck? Yeah. And it's actually made from traditional African textiles, right? And so she's pulling in this part of her culture, and she's also pulling in what we view in the West as royalty, right? This very traditional European type garb, and she's combining the two. And her eyes are closed in this. What could that possibly mean? Yeah, she doesn't want to face the fact. It's almost like she's dreaming of herself in this different position than the one that she's been given, right? So this character, Sophie, in her mind, is transcending above all of this oppression that she's experiencing and imagining this world for herself where she's royalty. So again, another artist using her identity, her culture, and oppression to give us this beautiful, heavily symbolic piece. And last up, we have Wendy Red Star. So Wendy Red Star is an indigenous American, and she's from Crow Nation. And this is one of her pieces titled The Last Things. So looking back to your elementary years, what do you think this artist is trying to tell us?
How stereotypical things it is.
Yeah, super stereotypical. What do you see that makes you say that?
The turkey and the...
Yeah, the giant inflatable turkey that people put on their lawns, the fake headdresses that don't really come from anything that we all make in elementary school.
And she's showing how, how we celebrate it looks like to her.
Yes, exactly. She's pointing out to us here in the West how unfair our celebration of Thanksgiving feels and how uneducated we are on what actually happened, right? What about all the stuff on the table? What kind of food? Yeah, more modern. It's also more processed, right? she actually said that she decided on this food for the table because the reservation, the land that it was built on where she grew up, this is really the only food that they had accessible to them. The land was unable to grow crops. They were given pretty much the worst of the worst land where she was living. So she remembers Thanksgiving being this meal where you got to get those little Debbie cake, oatmeal cream pies, right? Whereas a lot of us get to have like amazing cakes or pies that our grandparents made, right? So why do you think she chose all the plastic? This is a really synthetic looking scene we see here. Yeah, again, it's fake. We have a fake you. And we often view Native Americans as being something in the past too, right? When they're living now, we use them as costumes, and we kind of don't talk about that too often. Yeah.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah, exactly. What position is she in as well? Does it remind you of any paintings that we've looked at before? Yeah, the Last Supper, right? So she's comparing that to Americans' view of Thanksgiving here in the States. And she obviously disagrees with it. So, now that we looked at all these artists that use their own self-generated symbolism to express their identity and their work, I want you guys to really think about yourselves and the way you're viewed by the world and the things that define you as a person, right? So, how does color play into symbolism?
Maybe using more like cool tones could symbolize like something sad.
Yeah,
And then
exactly.
warm tones, something like that.
Right, so blue could symbolize sadness to one person, blue could symbolize calmness to another, or for me, blue's a happy color. Right, so color is extremely personal. I don't want you all to feel like you have to stick to some specific set of rules when it comes to color, but I do want you to be able to explain why you made the choices that you did. It could be a larger cultural meaning, psychological, or just something really personal to you. But with the artist statements that we're going to continue to write, I want you to be able to really explain to me why you're making those choices. So, what are we going to do? Something along these lines. So, we're going to be using kind of the same formatting all together to create, again, these symbolic self-portraits. This is mine that I created, but you don't see my face anywhere on here, right? This is all symbolism that I have generated, that I have my own explanation for, to kind of share a little bit about myself with you guys viewing it. Okay, so if you look in front of you, you should all have kind of one of those rubrics that I do that shows you how the grading is, shows you the instructions and the goals, things like that. And you also have this self-portrait as planning and reflection sheet. So I want you guys to kind of use this one to start your planning, because it can be kind of hard to pinpoint down, who am I? What do I want people to know about me? So brainstorm a little bit in your journals, fill this out, and then we can get moving on the piece of paper that you've got set up for you, okay? Yeah, so the notes that you guys just took about the lecture, that will be your art journal entry for the week, so make sure you do submit those to Canvas, okay? Any other questions? All right, let's get started brainstorming, and then after we're kind of done with that phase, we'll go into some modeling. Get some music on. Do you need the computer back, Pam?
That's all right.
Yes, you absolutely may. And then does anybody else have their books with them from last week, last project? Because if you are finished, I would like to see them. Huh? Okay, that's fine. Let's finish brainstorming for this, and then we can figure that part out. Ooh, great. That's all right. Looking good though. We're gonna have a little more time with this one, so if you need time to catch up on that one, I can give you a small extension, right? But we are moving it full force into the project, okay? Anybody else? How are you? Good, how are
at that cover.
Oh, you know.
This is like.
Okay.
Good, it's gorgeous.
Oh. Am I allowed to open it? But it's a secret.
Awesome.
May I tell you, my mom,
Yes. Or, actually,
My mom
Dr.
is-
Clark has it right now.
my mom is 74, and these were her cards that she used in school, that her school gave her in her senior year, or high school years, and these were her
Are
birthday
good
cards.
words.
So, they're ancient.
Like so, you so, right?
They are ancient.
What color thread would you like to use? Oh, okay.
I love the green. Oh my
Yes,
god.
Yeah,
Oh,
this
you
is
used
kind
to
of, this, so you can kind of understand what I'm looking for you to have.
I'm just
You know, so it's just kind of help you.
Okay.
Yes, yes, please do. Did I ask you guys what artist? Yeah, put her down, just so I know kind of what you're looking
Do you know
at.
what you're going, the direction you're going in? What's next?
Oh my gosh.
Should be good. Just wanted to check the strength before you went through all that first.
I love the lavender print. It's perfect.
Yeah, I was really happy with how they came out. And just the week. And that's what I would go there, she'd see the blue.
How do you want to seal? Do you want to seal it sometime today with one of the
Like the wax.
the wax sealer? Yeah, I have it on the shelf.
One thing, before you use it, do a test run, because it got too hot the other day, and was like spilling out everywhere, so do a test before you put on your book.
Look how she used this.
Oh, I know, it's beautiful.
There's a card from my mom's vocab. She's like 70 something, 74, 75, and her vocab words from high school. Look at this. Oh,
yeah.
Matisse.
These are their worksheets
I
that they get,
know.
and then I have a
I'm
folder
using
for
that
you.
high pitched voice. I'm sorry. It's the only reason because that me. Where did you get this stamp?
I'll be that's the lesson plan.
Oh my
kind of what we're
gosh,
doing.
you gotta bring it.
So during the lecture, I had them really pick apart the parts of a photo and describe the symbolism.
I love it. The masters.
I'm gonna write it all, yes. I'm gonna write like a letter to myself in there and then open it like whatever.
I love it.
So, what
Yeah.
we're gonna do is, you're gonna kind of fill this out and talk about who you are, how you identify, what you want people to know about you. Right, so just like the other one, it could be a personal experience, a cultural issue, social problem, or anything you want it to be about. And if you wanna brainstorm on paper first before jumping into this. How you doing, Mr. Fallon? Okay. Oh, it sounds good. Who's your artist this week?
So, right below Bob Marley is some really beautiful twine and some little green, and the twine you can pull it apart. So if you wanna just kinda breeze over there and see if any of those would work. And that stamp, we can plug into it, just in case you just need, just that little bit of something.
Right.
Yeah.
How was that space?
How you doing today?
Yeah. So for this one, you can also feel free to print out images like this if you feel like they're talking to you, because I got to pull it through. But it's all mixed media, so you're not expected to draw every frame of it. see some of your classmates' work from when I taught this unit last semester. Right, some really gorgeous stuff they have on here.
You need to,
Love that one with the bees. Mushrooms, everything on that one, right? Same. It's hard to figure that out, you know? So if also like is on here, if you want to talk about a personal experience again, or a social problem, I mean, it's really, this is so strong. And if you want to keep going with this, like all the art I made in college was about the same topic basically, just approached different ways. So that's completely legitimate too. If you're using this to work through something, go for it. This is gorgeous. I need to look through yours. Also, I've taken like real legitimate photos of all of your work, so I'll be sending those to you all via email. Like cropping and editing and color correcting and everything. How'd you get that on there?
It's a stamp. Yes, it's a stamp. We love matches.
I'll be loving this really good stuff. Stay tuned.
Cause I got figures and that was the other one.
I need to write some letters. You know, I feel what you're doing.
And that's like a direct parallel to the.
Yeah. Yeah. And I love how you ended up using the matchsticks.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because I remember we
What can I
talked
give
about
you
that.
for your book?
Okay.
Gold? I don't know if we have any more gold.
Is this for the book?
Yeah, I really don't think we have any more gold.
We have a lot of silver sparkly, but we don't have any gold sparkly.
I know there's a recipe to make gold. I don't know, what is that tool called? That pointing thing, that tool thing, the sharp
The
pointing
awl?
thing? What is that called? You're supposed to remember that. You're gonna hurt her feelings.
You're gonna make me cry. For this? And then like once you get it all the way through, you want to twist it and kind of open it up a little.
I have no gold. I have this color, and I have rose. I only have rose gold.
So one thing, whenever you're figuring out your layout, because I see a lot of you are already looking at that, if I can get your attention, please. What you definitely do not want is you don't want, so you have one of your circle pieces, right? When you're drawing your horizontal lines, you want them to intersect at different points through the circle. You do not want them to go through the bottom of the circle. That's called a tangent. Both mathematicians and artists call it that. And you do not want that because it adds a strange tension at the bottom of that circle. And your eye is going to want to go there as the viewer. So when we're thinking about composition, we definitely want to think about how these vertical and horizontal lines are interacting with our piece. Okay? Just food for thought while you're planning out your compositions.
Here, do you want workable or just seal it?
Just simple piece.
But you can see like how she string scissors and like the different outfits, like,
Yeah. So in this one, I mean, that's simple in reality, but all of those have super specific meanings for her. And that's all I want from this is for you guys to think about how you're developing your own symbol design. Like, so it does not have to read that cleanly. I get a mood looking at this, and that's really all we're asking for you. You know? But if you had the context, you would know, just like with Frida's piece, you know? So I wouldn't worry about that. So see your sense of composition.
yeah, I'm just trying to think.
Yes?
I had a lot of
So what?
I just tried to make it too complicated.
Oh, like the layout?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But like, I'm kind of doing like a fade, like really, like going from one side.
Yeah.
Kind of telling a story.
So it'll read like left to right?
Yeah.
Are you thinking mainly like colors to tell that story? Do you have any specific imagery that you picked up?
I was thinking of doing a smile, flowers, and a heart. Like a human heart, yeah. And like a death flower, contrast.
I like it. Yeah. And before you get too caught up in this, what I would do is I would start. Because in here too,